Okay, good evening. Today we're learning Maseches Chullin Daf Yud. We're starting 4 lines from the bottom on Yud Zayin Amud Beis. Let's get started. The easy part of the Gemara is up to the Mishnah. Then we're going to jump into the halachos of Hagurama, of cutting out of bounds on the trachea. Some very nuanced biological halachos. Thank God I've dissected a lot of animals, so I have seen some of these things, gross as they may be. Let's start with this part first. Amar Rav Huna bar Rav Katina Amar Rav Shimon ben Lakish shalosh pegimos hein. There are 3 types of pegimos, of flaws, that we're going to discuss. Pegimas etzem b'Pesach. We know that there's a halacha of etzem lo sish beruvo. You violate that iser even with a tiny little pegima. Pegimas ozen bebechor, an animal that's a bechor, if it has a blemish that is a little pegima in the ear, it is puzzle. And pegimas mum bekodshim. What's missing? Shchita knife. So it says the Gemara, Rav Chizda Amar af pegimas sakin. Beidach, why did the first shita of Rav Huna bar Rav Katina Amar Rav Shimon ben Lakish not included? Because bechulin lo kamairi. The comment that Rav Huna made was dealing with things that are exclusively applicable to kachim. This is not exclusively applicable to kachim. A sakin with pegimos applies both to chulin and to kachim. So that's what the Gemara says. V'chulan, and in all of these cases where we talk about pegimos kedei pegimas mizbeach, the size of the pegima that's invalidating of these 3 areas of Korban Pesach, of the etzem of the Pesach, the pegimas ozen, and the pegimas mum b'kodshim. How big is it? It's like the damage that would be caused to the mizbech. And what's that? Says the Gemara, "V'kama pegimas hamizbech." It must be top of Yud Ches Amud Aleph. Tachgor batzi porin. If your nail will get caught, that's a very, very small blemish. That means that the mizbech was built basically to perfection. How many imperfections do we have on the drywall of our house? At some point in our house, our wall was so ruined, we all took a league ball and see who could make the biggest spider, on the wall. We all threw as hard as I won, by the way. I was 15 years older than all my children at that. I mean, they were all like little kids. They were like 3. I was like 40. I'm like, ah. Destroyed my wall. I got it replaced though. Says the Gemara, even if it's 1 nick of the nail, it's going to be puzzled. Meisvei, hold on 1 second. Kama pegemas mizbech Reb Shimon ben Yochai Amar tefach. Not the size of a nail; it's much larger. It's a tefach. And Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Amar kezayis. But not who's talking about a siporin? Says the Gemara, Lokasha b'sida habe'avna. When we're talking about the limestone that's put around the stones of the mizbech, that can be bigger. That will have to be a shiur of a tefach or a kezayis machlokes between Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai and Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. However, habe'avna, the stones underneath, which are covered, but those stones, if they have a pegima that is even small enough to catch your nail, that is what would be problematic. Story time. Amar Rav Huna, Hai Tavcha, if there was a shochet, to lo sar sakina kame chacham, who did not show the blade to the chacham before he shechted, mishamtinan le, we'd put him into cherem. And virava amar me'avrinan le, we fire him, umachrezinan abisrei detrefahi. We put up a sign that says that his animals are treif. V'lo pligi, and they're not even arguing. Even though it sounds like they're arguing, they're not arguing. Kan, bishenimtze sakinu yafe. One is where, even though he didn't show it to the Rav, but if you check it and the knife is good, so then we're only going to be meshamtinan le, but we won't be ma'avrinan le. And kan b'shelo nimtze sakinu yafe. But in the second case where we find that a shchita knife is not good, so then we are meshamtinan le ve'avrinan, and then we tell everyone they cannot eat the meat. Ravina Amar, 10 lines down in Yud Ches Amud Aleph. If we find that after the shochet did not show it to a Rav, and then we checked the knife and the knife was bad, we actually spread it with feces. We get feces all over it so that it's not sellable at all. Total slap on the wrist. He did a double. Number 1, he didn't show the Rav. And number 2 is his knife was puzzle. So you're obviously not a trustworthy person, and no one can eat your food. And we're going to penalize you that even a goy who's allowed to eat a nevela, that's how all their food is nevela. Even a goy, you can't sell to the goy. Another story. Utavcha delosar sakina kame de Rabbi bar Chinana. Rabbi bar Chinana was the dayan of his own community, and the shochet there did not show his new knife that he bought. So this was like the sheet we saw earlier of Rava. So he was put into cherem, he was fired, and they said about him that everything he cut was treif. Mar Zutra and Rav Ashi came to visit Rava Bar Chinana, and Amar Lahu, Rava Bar Chinana had a broken heart about this matter, and he said to these two Rabbanim, to Mar Zutra and to Rav Ashi, Le'ainu Rabbanon is what should be the text of the Gemara. I need you to go look into something, Bimilse, to Talu Beitafle. This person, the Shochet who I just fired and put into Cherem, has children who are dependent upon him, and I feel bad. Vodka, Rav Ashi, the Sakine. So Rav Ashi went out and he went over to the Shochet and he said, show me the knife that you used, the one that you should have showed Rav Bar Chinana, show it to me. And he did. So V'nim says Yafiv and he brought him back into the fold. So that seems to be a problem because what happened to the Shamtina? Says the Gemara, Amar le Mar Zutra v'lo lechush mar l'sabo. Aren't you worried about the Rav? Well, we have this unique shita that he should be put into Shamtina. Now let's remember, Mar Zutra was one of the people in the room who was asked to help. So Rav Ashi and Mar Zutra were asked to help. Rav Ashi saw the blade and he was matir, the person to come back into Klal Yisrael, and he put him back to his post as a shochet. Mar Zutra was like, how can you do that? He's like, no, Amar le shlichusei kavdina. That's what he wanted us to do. He wanted us to be mekel and to undo the normal rule of being mishamtin le. A third of the way down, Amar Rabba Bar Huna, Shein Tlusha v'tziporin Tlusha, if I have a tooth that is very sharp and separated from a jaw, or if I have a tziporin, I have a nail that's Tlusha, that's separated and it's sharp enough to cut, Mutar lishchot ba lechatchila. This is a new business. You can grow very long nails, sell them as shchita knives. Who knew? How can you say that? We saw this the other day. That these things, the Magil Ktsir is a type of sickle, the Megira is some type of saw of some kind, Shinayim are teeth, and Siporin are nails. So those are aser. Forget about Mutter L'chadchila. You're not supposed to use them at all. It says the Gemara, when we talk about teeth, as long as you're only using one tooth that's very sharp, you're good to go in a sawing motion. Just imagine you took the tooth out of a massive shark, and the tooth is, I don't know how big teeth are, 8 inches long, but you sharpened it, no problem. It's like any other knife, no problem. But you can't use 2 teeth, because if you use 2 teeth, that's jagged now, that's like serrated, and that will cause for ikur. And that's not allowed. Tziporna also lo kasha, but tzlusha b'mechuberes. If my nail is very sharp, but it's attached to my hand, that's not allowed. Even though it's very convenient, but it's not allowed. That brings us to a new Mishnah, halfway down, a little bit more than halfway down on Yud Ches If you have some type of sickle and you're only cutting in one direction, Beis Shammai poslin ubeis Hillel machshirin, v'imichliku shineha harehi kesaken. Beis Shammai doesn't like it going in one direction. Beis Hillel is fine with it, and if you smooth it out, then everyone agrees it's a sakin. Rashi gives a little bit of color here. Magil Ktsir, what is it that we're talking about? Derech halichasa eina kora'as, and lebeis Hillel mipnei sherosheh kfufen me'od. So let's say, for example, I have a blade like this, and it's jagged. It is jagged, but all of them are angled this way. So it's like V's that are pointing toward the shochet. So when I push, nothing hooks, because every V is a drop off. So it will be like that, but it's not going to snag. So the Gemara said that's the case that we're dealing with. So the Gemara, that's what the Mishnah says. And if you smooth it out, then harei kisaken. Amar Reb Chia bar Abba, Amar Reb Yochanan. Perhaps we should say that Akshech Shiur Beis Hillel, that even if Beis Hillel was going to be matir beholach of the Magil Ktsir, because when you push the knife away from you, there is no ikur. But lo hechshiru elo l'tah ramidei nevela. Really, it's not that it's okay to eat. It just means that it won't be nisnabel, it won't be a nevela. But it's not really good. Aval b'achila asura. And Amar Rav Ashi, perhaps this is correct, because dekanami dektani Beis Shammai posem v'sel machshirin, but veloktani Beis Shammai osrin u'Beis Hillel matirin. We don't have osrin and matirin. Maybe, says the Gemara, that's a raya. Says the Gemara, not a good argument. According to you, who says that we're focused on whether or not this animal is an avela, then we should have said, listening Beis Shammai metamin u'Beis Hillel matarin. That would have been a much better answer. If what you're saying is true, is that really Beis Hillel does not like it for achila, only in as much as it's not tameh, then just say matarin. Then we won't eat it. That's fine. Therefore, it must be Ella. We're not talking about that, and therefore, postlanu machshirin v'osrin matirin chadamil. See, it's all the same over here, and therefore, Beis Hillel in our Mishnah, when he says machshirin, he's completely matir. It's totally mutter. In other words, if I have this knife that when I push it in one direction, yesterday we called this Maseches, but this is built this way. It has jagged edges, but it's all angled toward me as I push the knife away. So it might be bumpy, but it's not going to snag. So therefore, Rabbi Hillel says it's completely mutter according to this version of the Gemara. Chada milsi. Oh, now you'll shred the neck, 100%, 1,000 times. Even in the case of Maseches, when you do the Hava'ah, you'll ruin it. That's one hook. This is a disaster. I mean, it's a serrated blade. It's a serrated blade. I do wonder because I have serrated knives at home that are so incredibly sharp.
You still have that space though.
They do, and I'm sure they're treated as serrated. I would argue that our serrated blades today were probably better than their shechita blades then. They are so, I mean, the really good Cutco, these good companies that like really know how to make knives. But there's no way, I can't imagine it would ever be matir. I'm just saying that there's no comparison between the quality of they're hardened, they're so high quality. I've had some of these Cutco knives for 20 years. They're great still, just really good quality. Nevertheless, it has to be perfectly smooth. Next Mishnah, 10 lines from the bottom of Yod Ches Amud Aleph. Masnisin. All right. For those of you who are squeamish, I'll try to just let you know. I'll try to be as clear as I can without being gross.
Actually,
A picture. Yeah, that's for the really non-squeamish people. Says we could bring the book of Chullin illuminated if you guys want. Again, not for the faint of heart.
There's an old that's all.
That's what I would like to see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
They're amazing. They're amazing.
You have to be old to appreciate it. The other ones are gorgeous, but
I actually I'm like
skill
you.
at drawing.
I'm like you. I actually want pencil drawings. I don't want to. Yeah. Sure, we could find it.
Amazing.
Let's talk about the trachea. We all have one. So over here, like on our own tracheas, we have the Adam's apple, which is kind of toward the top of our trachea. And below is rings of cartilage. You can actually feel them if you pay attention. So the lower rings are like mid-trachea. The Adam's apple is toward the top of the trachea. And right above that is the peak of it where we have our vocal cords. So basically, we're going to discuss what is the upper limit on the trachea where we are supposed to cut. So let's get started. Hashochet mitoch ha-tabas, if you're cutting within the tabas, in this case, this is referring to the tabas hagdola, so the upper part, what we would call our Adam's apple. If you're cutting into the upper part, v'shiur ba, and you leave over melo hachut al pnei kula, and you leave over just a little bit of the tabas hagdola, shchitas ksher. So you cut through the whole kane, and you're cutting through the windpipe, but you've cut the whole kane, you leave over just a little bit of the tabas hagdola. The halacha is that it is shchitas ukshera. Rabbi Yossi is more mekel. You don't have to leave only a chut ha'se'ara. He says, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Omer melo chut al pnei ruba. Rove is fine. Rav Shmuel Damer Tabar Halachik Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda Vaf Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda Lo Amar Ele Betabas Hagdola Holum HaKefes Es Kol HaKanen. What's unique about the Tabas Gedola is that it completely circumferentially, it surrounds the whole kane. So if this is the kane, the Tabas Hagdola wraps all the way around. Masha'ain Kain, the ones that are underneath, only surround a little bit. They surround kind of 3 out of the 4 sides, but it's not full. So it does protect us, right? If someone were to get punched here, it won't collapse your trachea. It'll hurt, but it won't collapse your trachea. So this is the distinction the Gemara is making. Aval b'sha'ar tabaos lo, that if one were to shecht into the other tabaos, they should not do that. Really, halachically, what the shochet should do is palpate, find the in-betweens of the lower rings and cut in between them. That is the perfect way to do shchita. That's the ideal way. So what seems to be over here is that Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, much as he agrees that one is allowed to cut through the tabas hagdola, the upper part of the trachea, the bump, while that's true, you're not allowed to cut through the rings on the lower side. That's what the Gemara says. Ask the Gemara, are you sure about that? Ushar tabaos lo. Is it true that with the lower ones, the lower cartilages that wrap around the neck, is it true that Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda wouldn't allow it. Tanya, we have a brisa, last line of Yud Ches Amud Aleph. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, he says, top of Yud Ches Amud Beis, Hashoche Peshar Tabaos, cutting on not the Tabas Agdola, the upper one, but the lower ones down here. So those, Afal Pi She'ein Makifo says Kol HaKana, even though they don't entirely surround the circumference of the kaneh, they only, again, cover like this. They only cover a little bit or most of it, but not all of it. And even though that's true, so here we see dissenting opinions. On the previous page, you wanted to make an inference that Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda only allows cutting through the tabas hagdola because it goes around the entire circumference of the trachea. Masha Enkein, over here, we have an explicit brisa that says he allows even the smaller cartilaginous pieces that don't surround all the way, they only surround most of the way. The brisa continues, mugremes psula. Once you're mugremes, once you're outside of the boundary, meaning, depending on who you hold, like above the tabas gedola, you be pasul. And hey, Rabbi Chanina ben Antigonus al mugremes shikshera. He disagrees. He says you're allowed to go that far, no problem. You can go even higher on the trachea. Again, remember, what we're discussing today is the upper limit of the trachea, and we're going to go all the way to the last line of the page here. These are the basics of our conversation. So the brisa ends, and that's a question, a stira, because Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda seems to say the opposite of what we thought Rav and Shmuel were saying. Rav and Shmuel on the bottom of Yud Ches Amud Aleph wanted to say that Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda allows to do shchita through the tabas gdolam, but not through the tabas ketanos, through the regular tabas. Yet here we see that they are allowed, even because they're makifos as rova kaneh, because they cover the majority of the circumference of the kaneh of the trachea. So therefore, we can cut through them. Amar Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Tarte Kamar. He is saying that both of them are allowed to be used. And what about Rav and Shmuel? Because Rav and Shmuel seem to imply that the smaller tabos they could not cut through. Savre kavase bechada. They agree with him that you're allowed to cut through the tabas gedola. But upligi ale bechada. But they disagree with Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda in regards to one other aspect, which is the smaller cartilaginous pieces that are a little bit lower. Says the Gemara, how can you say that? Lo Omar ka Omar. If you look at the bottom, you'll see that they were quoting Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. If you look 4 lines from the bottom on Yud Ches Amud Aleph, it says, V'af Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Lo Omar Ella. They were quoting Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. So don't tell me that I, Rav and Shmuel, I hold like him by one. You were quoting him when you said that he doesn't allow to cut into the smaller tabos. So that doesn't work. Says the Gemara, you're making a good point, but hachi ka'amre, this is really what they're saying. Not so much that he said yes to tabas gedola and no to the smaller tabos, but rather halacha kemosa betabas hagedola. Not that he said it, but we hold like him in one, but not like the other. We hold like him in the tabas hagedola, like we saw in our Mishnah that you can do shchita through the upper cartilaginous piece that is around the entire circumference of the kan of the windpipe. The ein halacha kemosa b'shar tabos. And then Kisalik Reb Zera, when Reb Zera came from Eretz Yisrael came from Bavel up to Eretz Yisrael, Achal, something that was Mugremes to Rav Shmuel. He ate something beyond the line of what Rav and Shmuel were comfortable with, which is odd because Rav and Shmuel lived in Bavel, and so did Reb Zera until he moved to Eretz Yisrael. So says the Gemara, Amre le lav me asre de Rav Shmuel at? How can you eat from a shchita that's above the top of the tabas hagdola? Rav and Shmuel would say that animal is an avela. How can you do that? And you, Reb Zera, are from the same place that they're from. Amar lehu. He says, meaning Reb Zera defends himself, and he says, Man amrahu, am I quoting? Yosef bar Chia. This is our regular Rav Yosef. And the Rav Yosef who lost his memory, the Rebbe of Abaye, the same one. Why? Why did he quote him? Yosef bar Chia mikule alma gamir. He quotes shitas from all over the place. He's a catch-all. He says all the shitas. So he said a shita that was more mekel, which I followed. So Shamha Rav Yosef and Ikbid. Rav Yosef's like, what? What are you talking about? Amar Ana mikule alma gemirna. I don't quote from just anyone. Ana me Rav Yehuda gemirna. I quote from Rav Yehuda. Da'afilu sveike de gavre goris. If he has a suffix about who he's quoting from, he'll say that. For example, the Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba, Safek Mishmei de Rav, Safek Mishmei de Shmuel. Look what he did. Rav Yehuda was so careful about quoting who said it. In fact, when he quoted the halacha that we're about to read, which has nothing to do with what we're learning, we're just highlighting that Rabbi Yehuda was very careful. So Rabbi Yosef, who quoted Rabbi Yehuda was very careful. So Rabbi Yosef had a beautiful shita to fall back on. What did he say? Shlosha matir nasa bechor. 3 regular yidden are allowed to be matir a muman a bechor b'makom she'en momche. Now, whatever, that's not, we don't need that mar makom for now, other than to show that Rabbi Yehuda was not like loose-lipped. Obviously, he was very careful with the shitas he quoted. Asks the Gemara almost halfway down, the Reb Zera Lesle Nosnan alav Chomrei Hamakom Sheyatz Misham B'Chomrei Hamakom Shehalach Lisham. You just came from Bavel. Mimanav Shach, you should be machmer over here. You were being matir something that was mugmeres, something that was outside of the upper limit of the kana. You got to be more careful. Don't you have an obligation to keep the chumras of your hometown and your chumras of your new town? So says the Gemara, Amar Abaye Hani mitli mi Bavel leBavel. That's true from one community to another in Bavel, ume Eretz Yisrael Eretz Yisrael, or from 2 cities in Eretz Yisrael. Hinami me Eretz Yisrael leBavel, or if you're going from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel. Aval mi Bavel Eretz Yisrael, that would not be true, because Kevan the Anan Kaifinan Lahu Abdinan Kavasahu. This rule does not really apply, because we who are in Eretz Yisrael are kafu. We who are in Bavel are kafuf to those who are in Eretz Yisrael. And Rav Ashi Amar afilu tema mi Bavel Eretz Yisrael. We can even say that from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael the rule still applies. Hanimi leichad daito lachzor. That's true if you're planning on going back. The Reb Zera ein daito lachzor hava. So that's why the problem is not a problem for Reb Zera. Amar le Abaye le Reb Yosef. Abaye says Reb Yosef v'ha rabbanan da'asu mimechoza and Amrei. And Amar Reb Zera Mishmed Rav Nachman Mugremes Kshera. I don't understand. He says that he says to Rav Yosef, there are rabbis of Mechoza, and Reb Zera still did something that according to them, which would have been Mugremes, but he held that it was Kshera. So within Bavel we had stiras. It's not just Rav and Shmuel were machmir, is that we had somebody who was matir. So, and he was holding like a regular person. Says the Gemara, Amarle, Nara upashte. Rivers go in their own directions. In other words, there are more shitas here. So we've basically seen a variety of shitas of what the upper limit is. Is it on the Tabas Hagdola? Is it a little bit higher on the Tabas Hagdola? We're going to now see another shita. Reb Shimon ben Lakish achsher bechuda de kova. On top of the Tabas Gedola, there's another piece on top. I'm not sure what this is referring to biologically, but there's a little bit of this hat-looking fixture that's above here. So we're talking about upper limit. So the first shita says here in the Adam's apple. The second shita says it's even higher on the kova. So Reb Shimon ben Lakish is the biggest makel. Kare ale Reb Yochanan gisa gisa. Reb Yochanan said about this shita, he said gisa gisa. Rashi, 3 lines from the bottom. Hagas, klomar, yoser midai hechsharta. Te'ein kosher afilu l'Reb Chanina ela mimakom shechidudo maschil lalos. It has to be at a lower point than that. Back in the Gemara. Omar Rav Papi, mishmei de Rava, paga b'chite trefa. If you bump into the vocal cords that have a shape of chite, like wheat kernels, so then the animal is going to be a trefa. What do you mean paga? Paga v'noga ben. You're talking about that you actually cut through them. You actually contacted them. Odilma paga v'lo naga. You got to that space. You're near it, but you didn't cut it. Which one are we talking about? And the Gemara doesn't answer this question. Just leaves it. We don't know. So according to the Mekel Shita that we just saw of Reish Lakish, when we say that you're allowed to cut through the Chuda de Kova, or this discussion, I should say, about the Chite, the vocal cord. So we don't know exactly what it means. Itmar Amar of Papa Mishmei Rava, shiur b'chite kshera. If you are shiur b'chite, and this is a bit of a difficult thing to translate, it seems to be even if one were to cut the vocal cords at that height of the trachea, a higher place, the halacha is kshera. And Amar Rava Meimar Bar Mar Yenuka, I was in front of him. If you cut there, you're good to go. If you cut up high by the vocal cords, you're good to go. Amarli Ravina Ravashi, Amarli Rab. Shemin Misubra, Iklamar Zutra La'asrin, V'dara shiur b'chitek shera, he also said the same thing, that you're allowed to cut high in the vocal cords. This actually is what seems to be quoted in halacha. Seems to be quoted in the Rambam and as well in the Shulchan Aruch in Yordei Siman Kov. So it says the Gemara, that's that shita. But let's just see one last shita for the day. Mar bar Ravashi, Amar paga b'chitek shera, shiur b'chite trefa. If you actually cut through them, then it's a problem. But if you are shiur b'chite, if you left them over, meaning if you cut just below the vocal cords, you would still be kosher. So my point is that you can see that there's a significant variety of shitas over here. Let's also take into account that even if you cut through cartilage, but how good were their knives? Our knives could handle it, I'm sure, but even shechita knives can get nicked very, very easily, and one should definitely be careful. If you are planning on being a shochet anytime soon, Yaakov Sandberg actually was trained in shechita, one should learn about these halachos in more detail and try to cut a little bit lower than the Adam's apple. We'll stop right here. We're going to pick up tomorrow night with Daf Yomi. Wishing you all a beautiful night.